There is no doubt that electricity is one of the world's most valuable assets. It is also a crucial ingredient to conducive daily living and livelihood, industrialization, as well as national growth and development. In the last 3 decades, harnessing Nigeria's electrical energy to power the country's drive for social and economic development has been an acute challenge, mainly due to lack of foresight and investment. Despite a fast-growing population, the effect of Nigeria's failure to solve the problem is manifest in a stunted growth of productive and commercial industries, unemployment, and the unenviable social condition of majority of Nigerians who literally live in darkness in the 21st century. The billions of dollars pumped into the sector between 1999 and 2010 by successive administrations made little or no difference. And so, when fate thrust the mantle of leadership into the hands of President Goodluck Jonathan in 2010, one of his first actions was to craft a power sector reform roadmap to implement the successful delivery of the critical measures and to transform the industry by taking the following steps: the corporatization, commercialization, and eventual privatization of the successor power holding company of Nigeria, PHCN companies, the inflow of private sector investment, the creation of new power generation and distribution entities, and the subsequent development of a competitive electricity market. Goodluck Jonathan quickly empaneled 2 bodies. First, the Presidential Action Committee on Power, PACP, to oversee this transformation process by eliminating red tape and inefficient decision-making in government. The second was the Presidential Task Force on Power, PTFP, the engine room for implementing the mandate of the roadmap. 4 years on, Nigeria is closer to achieving sustainable power generation and supply than it has ever been. And this edition of our series, Jonathan, Work in Progress, will be focusing on what looks set to be President Jonathan's most crucial legacy: a vibrant, effective, and sustainable power sector.
We are building a sound and sustainable electricity industry with great expectations for robust growth in the sector. However, success in any endeavor does not happen by accident, but is facilitated by sound decision, conscious effort, and immense persistence, which the company management have and investors. We are committed to irreversibly repositioning the Nigerian power sector as a pivot for the attainment of the nation's development targets. We are also maintaining our policy push for increased diversification of our energy sector, expanding investments in large hydropower projects through public-private partnerships, and the provision of necessary support to accelerate the exploitation of our coal resources.
A candid assessment of efforts of the Jonathan administration to transform the power sector by Nigeria's Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, at the International Summit on Power Financing, which held in Abuja in 2014. Dr. Okonjo-Iweala's remarks speak volumes, considering the poor state of the sector prior to President Goodluck Jonathan's assumption of office on May 29, 2011. Like every other Nigerian, President Jonathan too understands the grim realities of the dwindling fortunes in the nation's power sector. That's why he made the sector a top priority of its transformation agenda from the onset.
Nigeria is positioned as an economy to be reckoned with, and that this conference in which we are participating today gives you the unique opportunity to be here in Nigeria. By thanking His Excellency Mr. President and His Excellency Mr. Vice President for their strong leadership of the government's power sector reform program. I can personally attest that I have never seen the intensity with which this sector has been moved and pushed and overseen by both the President and the Vice President personally.
The President has tenaciously pursued policies and programs that have significantly improved power generation and distribution as well as transmission across the length and breadth of the country. President Jonathan's passion to turn around the fortunes of the power sector is made clear in the foreword to the Roadmap for Power Sector Reform document, where he wrote, "Our commitment is to bring an end to our nation's stunted growth and usher in the fresh air of prosperity by pursuing a new era of sector-wide reform, which is driven by improved service delivery to every class of customers in the Nigerian electricity sector." The Power Sector Reform Program, which President Jonathan launched on August 26, 2010, remains one of the most important programs of his government to transform the country and lives of the citizens. It triggered the significant progress that has been witnessed in fast-tracking structural reforms aimed at removing obstacles to private sector investment in the power sector.
Our new and prospective investors, local and international, of government's continued support in making the emerging market space conducive for business. With all of you, financial giants and gurus, and determined and conscientious investors and prospective investors all gathered in this arena to be part of an emerging great success story. Let the courtship begin. Let the matchmaking begin. Let it lead to engagement, and let it lead to marriage. We are open for business.
The document outlines government's strategy to privatize the PHC and successor companies and reform the fuel-to-power sector, all in efforts to establish a viable and sustainable power industry. Despite daunting challenges faced by government in accomplishing the goals of the reform, especially in the form of organized resistance from many quarters, significant progress has been made relative to the situation before the launch of the roadmap. One of the main goals of the reform is to create a sustainable, private sector-driven power sector as an efficient alternative to the status quo where the sector was entirely government concern. The development of the power sector has involved huge investments by the Jonathan government. For example, the construction of the NIPP thermal power stations nationwide with a combined capacity of 4,775 megawatts has cost the government an equivalent of $3.8 billion, while the sum of about $207.93 million has gone into the development of small and medium hydropower projects nationwide with a combined capacity of 83.25 megawatts. Evidence that the reforms are working can be seen in the success story of the ambitious power sector privatization exercise, adjudged globally as the largest and most transparent so far in Africa.
I want to place it on record that no administration has brought to the power sector so much revamping, rectification of anomalies, reconstruction, extension, expansion of both transmission and distribution infrastructure as the current administration. If it took so many administrations to bring Nigeria up to about 3,000 megawatts of power supply on a regular basis, and it took just one administration to exceed on a constant basis 4,000 megawatts, and that's the administration of President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan.
As at 2014, Nigeria had successfully transited from a vertically inclined government monopoly to a privately structured and regulated private sector-dominated market. This process has received global commendations. 11 distribution companies, DISCOs, and 6th-generation companies, GENCOs, offered for sale have been handed over to the new private owners. The privatization marked the conclusion of a process that saw to the unbundling of Power Holding Company of Nigeria into the 11 DISCOs, 6 GENCOs, and 1 transmission company. Under the Jonathan government, there has been a deliberate decentralization of the power sector, especially in the area of generation. This is in realization of the fact that electricity generated close to the consumer results in higher fuel efficiency as well as better reliability and responsiveness to load variations. The many big, small and medium hydropower stations and coal-to-power projects that now dot the entire landscape of Nigeria are all aimed at improving efficiency, flexibility and security of power supply in line with standard global practice of power decentralization. Acutely aware of the need to brace up to evacuate the expected huge volume of power to be generated, the Jonathan administration quickly moved to activate the contract with Manitoba of Canada for the management of the Transmission Company of Nigeria (TCN) and has consciously and consistently continued to strengthen transmission infrastructure across the country.
Government is investing significantly in hydro, especially Mambila. We're already working on Zungeru, which is 700 megawatts. Mambila will give us 3,050 megawatts, and there are others, maybe about 20 of them, that are actually ready for exploitation, but these are for small hydros. Government is actually moving in that direction.
Nigeria is also now taking various steps to implement renewable energy and energy efficiency programs. This is to increase the energy mix. For instance, the Jonathan administration has embraced the wind energy technology as a source of electricity generation. This is an alternative form of renewable energy, particularly in northern Nigeria, which enjoys high wind speed.
Nigeria is now working on emplacing a national policy on renewable energy. That had never happened before. In addition to that, the government is working very hard to promote renewable energy, especially solar, because the government of Nigeria recognizes that virtually all parts of Nigeria are suitable for solar energy.
President Jonathan commissioned the solar-powered electrification project tagged Operation Light Up Nigeria, designed to provide rural dwellers with practical, affordable and realistic access to electricity.
Mr. President himself physically commissioned on the 13th of January 3 communities to flag off Operation Light Up Rural Nigeria. He did that, and these communities, every household, every house, every street, every road path is lighted by solar.
Under the project, the Federal Ministry of Power, in conjunction with Philip International of Netherlands and Schneider of Germany, will implement micro-off-grid wind or solar-powered lighting systems to light up homes, community, common areas or centers, as well as major inlet and outlet roadways into rural communities.
The new investors are pumping in money to stabilize power supply. But what sometimes brings blackout is when we have system collapse, because the gas is coming from one area and then something happens, it is blown up, then we all have to wait for one of the hydro dams in Shiroro, Jeba to black start it. So we are now encouraging energy mix.
Short-term domestic gas supply programs were also put in place to address the challenge of gas supply to existing and ongoing power plants. Under President Jonathan's administration, Nigeria's domestic gas supply has grown from a modest supply level of 300 cubic feet per day to an all-time high of 1,500 cubic feet per day. About 70% of this is channeled to the power plants. The administration has given assurance that it will continue to develop new gas supply sources and grow the medium-term supply capacity within the next 4 to 5 years to about 3,500 million cubic feet per day in support of the power sector. To achieve this, the administration has embarked on what observers see as the most aggressive expansion of the nation's gas pipeline infrastructure. Work has been completed on the pipeline connections to all of the nation's power plants. A commercial framework for gas supply has been put in place, and this has seen the gas-to-power price reduced to a more commercial level than they were before the administration came on board. The administration has strengthened power market intermediaries such as the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading PLC (NBET) with sufficient working capital to enable its solvency and creditworthiness based on the payment risk exposure by each of the discos. NBET is now cash-backed with over 120 billion naira, that is $750 million in financing to help stimulate greater private investments in the sector. From the 2,500 megawatts the Jonathan administration inherited in May 2011, Nigeria currently generates approximately 4,500 megawatts of electricity. That is just about 10% of power requirements of the country. Worried by this situation, therefore, the Jonathan administration embarked on expansion of infrastructure to shore up the generating capacity to 16,000 megawatts, as well as expand and strengthen the transmission network to wheel 16,000 megawatts and increase electricity access to 50% from the current 40% this year. The development of infrastructure by the Jonathan administration has given birth to 10 gas-fired plants under the National Integrated Power Project (NIPP) scheme, managed by the Niger Delta Power Holding Company. The 10 projects have a combined generation capacity of about 5,222 megawatts, and they are at various stages of completion. The projects are located in Omotosho, Olorunshogo, Alaoji, Sapele, Giregu, Iobo, Gbarain, Calabar, Egbema, and Omoku towns. Only recently, 4 new power plants were commissioned at Azura in Edo State, Zungeru in Niger State, Omotosho in Ondo State, and Gedu Town. Also, a number of distribution projects that cover maintenance and expansion have been executed through the 11 distribution companies. These projects and more illustrate the Jonathan administration's commitment and focus, just as they signify government's recognition of the significant role the power sector plays in driving economic growth.
This is part of our administration's continuing efforts to provide regular electricity to the teeming population of our great country. In the months ahead, I will be commissioning a number of other equally significant completed NIPP power plants, which will add close to 5,000 megawatts to our generation capacity. Today's event, therefore, goes beyond the symbolic commissioning of a power plant. It underlies our strong commitments and systematic practical implementation and integrated vision in the power sector.
Also, as part of efforts to boost power supply in the country, the Jonathan administration has commissioned several new injection substations to provide more quality power supply and strengthen the distribution aspect of the electricity value chain. Across the country, work is also ongoing on projects designed to address electricity distribution network, the voltage profile. Also, the Jonathan administration has shown uncommon commitment to addressing the prepaid meter problem, and some studies say it will cost about $4 billion to install between 23 and 30 million units for all segments of customers in Nigeria. Over time, vandalism of critical government infrastructure, such as electricity facilities and petroleum pipelines, had impacted negatively on Nigeria's economy, besides its toll on pollution. The menace of pipeline vandalism was largely responsible for the inability of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation (NNPC) to achieve its projected 2.5 million barrels per day crude oil production, targeted in 2013. Available data also shows that the country loses as much as 150,000 barrels of crude oil per day each time a pipeline connecting an oil exports terminal is shut down due to act of vandalism. 1999 and 2009, before the advent of the Jonathan-led government, the disruption in the free flow of petroleum products and crude supply in NNPC pipeline system led to a colossal cost of over 174.57 billion naira in product losses and repairs of product pipeline vandals. Such unpatriotic act invariably led also to the inability of the NNPC to meet domestic gas supply to Nigeria's power sector. A former group managing director of the NNPC, Mr. Andrew Yakubu, once told the forum that about 480 million metric standard cubic feet of gas supply per day, an equivalent of 1,600 megawatts of power, had been lost to pipeline vandalism.
It is about the commercial template that we're operating. It's about the security challenges that we have. Now, when you account for crude, for instance, in the terminal, and not all that crude gets to your refinery, how can you have it? It is absolutely impossible. We are all aware that the trunk lines have been under serious challenge, serious attack. When you are aware of what happened in Arepo last year where my staff were killed. When you bring in products and those products are stolen through incessant attack on the product distribution lines, can you recover that? It's absolutely impossible.
Given such grim picture, the Jonathan administration had since 2011 partnered security agencies to effectively check the menace of vandalism. The obvious synergy and coordinated approach in the fight against vandals and oil thieves has produced positive results.
To me, I will classify vandalism as an act of terrorism. Because terrorism should not only end where people carry firearms and cut short the destiny of others. Terrorism is equally and should be viewed as an act by either a set of persons or gang of persons rising up against a state, rising up against the collective wealth that will lead to the economic advancement of a state, ganging up against and totally, with all sense of barbaric action, denying a state the right of quality lifestyle, the right of advanced technology, and above it all, the right of having their comfort at the time they so desire.
Another milestone in the administration's power supply revolution is the transfer of $200 million to the infrastructure window of the country's sovereign wealth fund, the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority (NSIA), from the Eurobond process to enable its partner, the private sector, on gas-to-power (PPAs). Already, a number of power purchase agreements are being negotiated with an increasing number of independent power producers (IPP) under the bulk trader scheme. Significant progress has also been recorded in restoring investor confidence, as evidenced by increased investment and signing of Memorandum of Understandings (MOUs). The most recent is the MOU signed with Power China Corporation to develop 20,000 megawatts of thermal power plants with associated substations and transmission lines up to 10,000 kilometers.
Today we celebrate the commitment of the government of Nigeria to liberalizing the power sector, thus ensuring an adequate and reliable energy supply for the people of Nigeria.
No doubt, President Jonathan and members of the Federal Executive Council have shown high-level political will in launching the process fundamental to the transformation witnessed in the power sector. Without such level of commitment, the achievements recorded from 2011 to date would not have been realized, particularly the launch of the Power Sector Roadmap in August 2010 by President Jonathan has accelerated the pace of the reform and the significant achievements recorded. With a population beyond 160 million, a current forecast of power demand of 13,070 megawatts, and the projection to generate 25,000 megawatts by 2020, up from the current generation value of roughly 4,500 megawatts, Nigeria can be described as a most profitable haven for investors in terms of developing the power sector and profiting from the venture. Power being an essential need, it is apparent that the gains that will accrue to investors in the Nigerian power sector are enormous. Key players in the power sector and indeed Nigerians agree that given the panache and dedication of the Jonathan administration to efforts to unbundle and privatize the Power Holding Company of Nigeria, PHCN, President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan is certainly walking the talk. Nigerians can only ask Mr. President to carry on with the good works in the power sector even beyond 2015.